The taxi's meter clicked over again, adding another dollar I was meant to find painful. I watched the skyline of Houston glitter against the velvet dark. We were heading to a part of the city where the streetlights seemed to shine brighter, cleaner. The kind of place where my worn polyester dress was meant to be invisible. It was a shapeless gray thing. I'd found it in the back of my closet, a relic from a life I'd left behind decades ago. I'd paired it with flat, scuffed shoes and pulled my hair back into a simple, unstyled bun. I looked like a woman who counted pennies, a woman who worried about the cost of this taxi ride. I am not that woman. To the world, I am Grace, a 60-year-old African-American woman who lives in a modest apartment. To my son, Jamal, I am just Mom. He has no idea that his simple mother, the one who clips coupons, is the regional director of operations for Global Tech. He doesn't know my monthly salary is $50,000. He doesn't know my investment portfolio is worth over $8 million. I never told him. I wanted him to value hard work, not inheritance. I wanted him to build a life based on character, not a bank account. And tonight, I needed to know what kind of character his new family possessed. Hello, everyone. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. It keeps our stories alive. The test had been decided 3 days ago during a phone call that still left a cold knot in my stomach. Jamal's voice was tight, high-pitched with a nervousness I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. Mom, they're in town. Talia's parents. He rushed out. Lorraine and Reginald. They want to meet you, properly. That sounds lovely, son. Where are we going? He hesitated. Well, that's the thing. They booked a table at the Cypress. Tonight. I knew the Cypress. It was the kind of restaurant where a single appetizer cost more than my weekly grocery bill, or at least the grocery bill I let him see. Mom? He pressed on, hearing my silence. Please, just be nice. They're a little intense. I knew what intense meant. It was code. What did you tell them about me, Jamal? I asked, my voice quiet. The silence that followed was heavy with shame. His shame, not mine. I just said, that you worked hard, that you raised me on your own, that you live simply. He didn't need to say more. I heard the apology in his tone. He was apologizing for me, for my simple life, my small apartment, my lack of brand names. In that moment, a cold resolution settled over me. Don't you worry, baby, I said, my voice soft. I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it. If my son was ashamed of his simple mother and his new wealthy in-laws were coming to judge, then I would give them exactly what they expected. I would play the part of the poor, naive mother. I would be the woman they thought they could look down on. I wanted to see their true faces, unfiltered by courtesy or pretense. The taxi pulled up under a gleaming black awning. A doorman in a sharp uniform rushed to open my door, his professional smile faltering for just a fraction of a second as he took in my gray dress. He thought I was a mistake. Good. The performance had already begun. I walked into the lobby. The air was thick with the scent of old money and expensive perfume. Soft piano music drifted from a grand piano in the corner. And then I saw them. They were seated at the best table, a large booth by the window overlooking the city. Jamal saw me first. He half stood, his face pale, his smile strained. My son, my beautiful boy, looked like he was walking to his own execution. His wife, Talia, sat beside him, stiff as a board, but my eyes were on them. Lorraine and Reginald. They were exactly as I'd pictured. Reginald was in a tailored suit that probably cost $5,000, a heavy gold watch gleaming on his wrist. Lorraine was a vision in dark emerald green, diamonds dripping from her ears and throat. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like a queen surveying her court. I took a slow breath and walked toward the table. Jamal hurried to intercept me, giving me a quick, awkward hug. "Mom, you made it." "Of course, baby." I turned to his in-laws. I gave them the warmest, most humble smile I could manage. Reginald nodded at me, a quick, dismissive gesture. Lorraine just stared. Her eyes traveled from my scuffed shoes, up my wrinkled dress, to my plain face. Her painted-on smile didn't just fade. It froze. And then it curdled into a look of undisguised, profound disdain. That look of disdain lasted only a second, but it told me everything I needed to know. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you," Lorraine said. Her voice was thin, brittle as sponge sugar. She did not offer me her hand. "You too, Lorraine Reginald," I said, keeping my smile fixed. "Talia, you look beautiful." My daughter-in-law gave me a weak, terrified smile. "Thank you for coming, Grace." "Sit, Mom, sit," Jamal said, pulling out a chair. I saw in that single gesture where I stood. He pulled out the chair at the far end of the long table, the most distant spot from Lorraine and Reginald. I was seated like a poor relation, an afterthought. I settled into the plush velvet, my worn canvas tote bag clashing horribly with the pristine white tablecloth. I placed it on the floor beside my feet, out of sight. The waiter, a young man with a stiff back, materialized instantly. He filled their water glasses first, then mine. He handed them their thick, leather-bound menus. Then he handed me mine. It was heavy, and the items listed had no prices. That was how you knew it was truly expensive. I held it open, pretending to be overwhelmed by the fancy script. "We are staying at the Monarch," Lorraine announced to no one in particular, though her voice was loud enough for the entire section to hear. "The presidential suite. It's simply adequate." Reginald grunted. "The service has gone downhill. $1,200 a night, and you still have to ask them to chill the champagne properly." $1,200. I thought about my first apartment, the one Jamal spent the first 5 years of his life in. The rent was $300 a month, and I'd struggled to make it every single time. I remembered the smell of the hallway, a mix of boiled cabbage and old carpet. I remembered working all day as a secretary, my fingers aching from the typewriter. I'd take the bus home, pick up Jamal from the daycare run by Mrs. Davis in her apartment, and then stay up until 2 in the morning. I wasn't watching television. I was studying. I studied accounting. I studied finance. I studied logistics and supply chain management from textbooks I bought at secondhand stores. I was 25 years old, completely alone, with a baby boy who depended on me for everything. I was determined I would not be a secretary forever. And I wasn't. From secretary to administrative assistant, from assistant to office manager, from manager to logistics coordinator, from coordinator to department head. It took me 20 years of relentless, agonizing work, 20 years of missing parties, of dating no one, of pouring every spare cent and every waking hour into myself and my son. Now, I manage the operations for all of Global Tech's facilities in 5 states. I built wealth brick by brick in silence. I invested, I saved, I multiplied. I did it all so my son would never have to know the kind of fear I had lived with. But I also did it quietly. I never moved out of our modest, comfortable apartment complex. I never bought a luxury car. I taught Jamal that dignity wasn't in the brand of your shoes, but in the strength of your word. I looked at Reginald's flashy gold watch and felt a deep, profound sadness. The wine list here is acceptable, Reginald said, scanning the pages. I suppose the '09 Lafite will have to do. $250, barely aged. Just water for me, please, I said quietly when the waiter looked at me. Lorraine's eyes flickered in my direction. Her lips pursed in a tiny condescending smile. She and Reginald exchanged a look. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. The look said, "Of course, she can't afford it." They spent the next 10 minutes ignoring me completely. They talked about their upcoming trip to Europe. Just a quick jaunt. The renovation of their main home. The Italian marble was a nightmare to source. And Talia's brilliant career. Jamal tried several times to include me. "Mom just repainted her kitchen," he offered weakly. "It looks great." Lorraine smiled at him, a bright false smile. "How lovely. It's so important to have hobbies." She then turned to me, as if suddenly remembering I was there. Her diamond earrings flashed under the chandelier. "So, Grace," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Jamal tells us you work in an office?" I lowered my eyes, as if intimidated by her direct gaze. "Yes, ma'am. Just administrative work," I said, my voice soft and airy. "Filing, you know. Paperwork. Just simple things to keep me busy." "Ah," Lorraine said, sharing another loaded glance with her husband. "Administrative work. How steady. All work is dignified, of course." "Of course," I agreed, nodding my humble agreement. The waiter returned. "Are we ready to order?" I stared at the menu, feigning confusion at the French terms. "Oh my, I'm not sure what any of this is." Lorraine sighed, a put-upon theatrical sound. "Don't you worry, Grace. I'll handle it. She'll have the chicken." She looked at the waiter. "Just the simple roasted chicken. Nothing too adventurous. We don't want to overdo it." The dismissal was as sharp as a slap. She had just ordered for me as if I were a child or a simpleton who couldn't be trusted with a menu. Jamal flinched, but he said nothing. Talia was intensely studying her napkin. "Thank you, Lorraine. You're so kind," I said. For the next 20 minutes, they spoke as if I wasn't there. Lorraine talked about their properties. They had a vacation home in Florida and a condo in Europe. Reginald complained about the stock market, name-dropping the CEOs of companies I personally did business with. I ate my simple chicken, which was, I noted, dry, and I listened. I listened to the way they spoke about people. The help at their hotel was slow. The driver they'd hired was incompetent. The world, it seemed, was full of people who failed to meet their impossibly high standards. I said nothing. I just watched. I watched my son, who looked smaller in his chair with every passing minute. He was so desperate for their approval, so terrified I would do something to embarrass him. It broke my heart. This was the boy I had taught to read. The boy I had stayed up with when he had a fever. The boy I had seen graduate from college, my heart swelling with a pride so fierce it almost choked me. And now he was shrinking, trying to make himself invisible, all because of their money. The main courses were cleared. The waiter brought small, sculpted desserts. "You know, Grace," Lorraine said, suddenly turning her attention back to me. Her smile was bright, but her eyes were cold as ice. "We believe in family, deeply. Family is the most important investment." I nodded slowly. "I agree. That's why," she continued, "Reginald and I were so thrilled when Talia married your Jamal. We want them to have the absolute best of everything." She took a delicate bite of her dessert, which looked like a tiny gold-flecked sphere. "A young couple needs a strong, stable start, don't you think?" she said, her eyes fixed on mine. "We were just happy to provide $60,000 for their house down payment." It's what good parents do. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. It's what good parents do. I felt the sting of it, exactly as she'd intended. The implication was clear. I had not done my part. I was not a good parent. I saw Jamal's knuckles turn white as he gripped his water glass. He kept his eyes on his plate. He was drowning in shame, and it made me furious. That's incredibly generous, Lorraine, I murmured, playing my role. You've blessed them so much. Oh, that was just the start, Reginald boomed, jumping in. He puffed out his chest, clearly pleased to have an audience for his generosity. We couldn't have them taking some cheap trip, could we? We paid for their honeymoon, of course. $20,000. 20,000? I whispered, widening my eyes. 3 weeks in Italy. The best hotels, private tours. They deserved it. Our Talia, he said, patting his daughter's hand, is used to a certain standard of living. He looked at me. And we want to ensure she maintains it. There it was again, the clear, unspoken message. You are not up to our standard. You are the weak link. It sounds like a fairy tale, I said, my voice barely audible. Lorraine leaned in, her perfume washing over me, a heavy, cloying scent. She put her manicured hand on my arm, a gesture that was meant to look like sympathy, but felt like possession. Grace, we know it must be difficult for you, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Raising Jamal all on your own, living on a tight budget. We admire your struggle, truly. I managed, I said, pulling my arm back gently. Of course you did, she cooed, but now Jamal is in a different league. He's married to our daughter. He has new responsibilities. She glanced around the table, then looked back at me, her eyes hardening. We worry about him, she said. I froze. Worry about Jamal? Why? Lorraine sighed, a sound of deep, manufactured concern. We worry, she said, enunciating each word, that he has burdens. The word landed on the table like a slab of raw meat. Burdens. Burdens? I repeated. I kept my voice small, confused, laced with the exact amount of hurt she expected to hear. Lorraine nodded, her expression now one of severe maternal concern. It was a performance, and a very good one. Grace, let's be frank, she said, leaning in closer, as if we were two housewives sharing a secret over a back fence. We're all family here. We know your situation. She waved a hand dismissively in my direction, encompassing my gray dress, my small apartment, my entire life. At your age, living alone, with such a limited, fixed income, it's only natural that Jamal would worry. I don't ask him for anything, I said, a genuine edge slipping into my voice. You don't have to ask, Lorraine said, as if explaining something to a child. He's a good son. He feels responsible for you. That responsibility, it weighs on him. It takes his focus away from his new life, from his wife. Talia sank lower in her seat, her face pale. She looked like she wanted to evaporate. That's not fair to Talia, Lorraine finished, sitting back as if she had just delivered an undeniable truth. Mom, stop it, Jamal finally burst out. His voice was a low, angry growl. You don't know what you're talking about. Jamal, darling, calm down, Lorraine said, not even looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on me. We are handling this. Your mother understands. Don't you, Grace? I didn't answer. I just watched her. The arrogance of this woman, to speak about my life, my finances, my relationship with my son, as if she had any right in the world. He's our son-in-law now, Reginald added, his deep voice backing up his wife. His stability is our primary concern, and a mother who might need financial help at any moment, that's not stability. The insult was complete. I was no longer a person. I was a liability, a bad investment. The rage I felt was so cold, so pure, it almost sharpened my vision. I could see the tiny cracks in Lorraine's makeup, the nervous flutter in Talia's eyelid. So, I said, my voice just above a whisper. What are you suggesting? Lorraine's smile returned, triumphant. She had cornered me. She had won. She reached across the table and patted my hand again. The diamonds on her ring felt like ice. Don't you worry at all. Reginald and I have already discussed it. We want to help you. I kept my face a perfect mask of neutral, slightly confused interest. Help me? Yes, Lorraine said, beaming. She was in her element now, the grand benefactor. We know you'd never ask for it. People with your kind of dignity never do. It's admirable. But we're a practical family. We see a problem and we fix it. Reginald leaned forward, placing his thick forearms on the table. He was the closer. We have decided, he announced as if issuing a corporate decree, to offer you a monthly stipend. I just stared, letting the silence hang. A stipend? I repeated dumbly. Exactly, Lorraine chirped. A little something to ease your burdens. We were thinking, say, $800 a month. She said the number and then watched me, expecting, I realized, to see gratitude. She expected tears of relief. She expected me to bow down and thank her for these scraps from her magnificent table. $800. I calculated it in my head. That was less than what I paid in monthly maintenance fees for my investment properties. It was less than I spent on charitable donations every week. $800, I said, letting my voice fill with wonder. That's so much. Well, it's what we can comfortably spare, Lorraine said, with a little wave of her hand, as if brushing away a trifle. It should be more than enough for you to live comfortably, pay your bills, perhaps even buy a new dress or two. Her eyes flickered to my gray polyester outfit. I don't know what to say, I stammered. You don't have to say anything, Reginald said, his voice firm. We consider it a family investment, a way to ensure harmony. He steepled his fingers, his gold watch catching the light. Of course, he continued, his tone shifting, this arrangement would come with a small understanding. I knew it. Here was the other shoe, dropping with the force of a hammer. An understanding? Just a small one, Lorraine said, her sweet voice returning. We would expect you to give Jamal and Talia their space. I frowned. Space? Yes, they're newlyweds, Grace. They're building a life. They don't need their mother calling every day. They don't need interference. Interference, Reginald clarified, means you don't call them with problems. You don't drop by unannounced. You let them live their life, the life we are helping them build. They wanted to buy my silence. They wanted to pay me to disappear. They were offering me $800 a month to abandon my son. The rage that had been simmering in my stomach turned to pure, cold ice. It flowed through my veins, sharpening my hearing, steadying my hands. Jamal was frozen, his face a mask of horror. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was completely neutered by their wealth and audacity. Talia had tears welling in her eyes, but she stared at her lap, refusing to meet my gaze. She was a silent accomplice. I looked at Lorraine. I looked at Reginald. They were smiling, pleased with themselves. They had solved the Grace problem. They had tidied up the one messy, poor part of their daughter's new life. I picked up my white linen napkin. I dabbed at the corners of my mouth, a gesture of delicate finality. I placed the napkin slowly, deliberately, on the table beside my plate. And then I lifted my head. That's enough! Jamal's voice finally ripped through the silence. He threw his own napkin onto the table and half stood, his chair scraping violently against the floor. That is enough. Mom, we're leaving, right now. His face was flushed with a mixture of rage and profound shame. Jamal, darling, sit down, Lorraine snapped, her mask of sweetness vanishing. We are talking like adults. No, you're not. He stammered, searching for the word. You're insulting my mother. We are helping your mother, Reginald countered, his voice a low growl of warning. I said, we're leaving. Jamal grabbed my arm, or tried to. I didn't move. I gently placed my hand on his. No, Jamal, I said. My voice was different. It was no longer the soft, airy, timid whisper of Grace, the administrative assistant. It was the voice I used in my boardroom. It was clear, cold, and carried an absolute authority that cut through the tension like a diamond. Sit down, son. Jamal froze. He stared at me, his eyes wide. He had never heard that tone directed at him, but he recognized its power. Slowly, he sank back into his chair. The entire table was still. Even the waiter, who had been approaching, paused a few feet away. I turned my full attention to Lorraine. The humble, apologetic smile was gone. $800 a month, I repeated. My voice was calm, conversational, but it had a steel edge that wasn't there before. It's a fascinating number. Lorraine shifted in her seat. Her smile faltered. She was a predator who had just seen the sheep bear a set of wolf's teeth. It's a generous offer, she stammered, suddenly on the defensive. Oh, it's fascinating, I agreed. I'm just curious about the math. How did you arrive at it? Did you calculate my rent, which you've never seen? My grocery bill, which you've never paid? Or did you just pull a number from the air that felt appropriately charitable? Lorraine's face paled. Now, see here, I don't appreciate that tone. And I said, leaning forward just slightly, don't appreciate being offered an allowance to abandon my son. So I suppose we're even. We were just trying to help. Reginald boomed, trying to regain control. Were you? I looked at him. Or were you trying to control? You've spent this entire dinner talking about your money, the $1,200 a night suite, the $20,000 honeymoon, the $60,000 down payment. I ticked them off on my fingers one by one. That's $80,000 you've invested in this marriage, I said. I looked from Lorraine to Reginald, my gaze sharp. Tell me, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet, was that $80,000 a gift? Or was it the first installment payment for owning my son? How dare you? Reginald slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. I don't know who you think you are coming in here. I know exactly who I am, I interrupted. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It simply cut us off. The question is, Reginald, do you? I looked at all of them, one by one. Jamal, staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. Talia, her mouth half open, tears forgotten. Lorraine and Reginald, their faces masks of sputtering, indignant rage. The time for acting was over. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice resonating in the sudden, dead silence of our table. All work is dignified, including my own. I paused, then continued. You're speaking to Grace Sterling. I am the Regional Director of Operations for Global Tech. Lorraine's angry expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. The name Global Tech was a titan in Houston. I oversee the logistics and supply chains for 5 states, I went on, my tone as flat as if I were delivering a quarterly report. My decisions direct a budget of over $200 million a year. My monthly salary, not including bonuses or stock options, is $50,000. The silence was absolute. Jamal made a small, choking sound. He looked at me, his eyes screaming a question he couldn't ask. My investment portfolio, which I have managed myself since I was 30, is currently valued at just over $8 million. Lorraine's face visibly collapsed. The color drained from it, leaving her expensive makeup looking like a cracked, painted mask. Reginald's jaw simply dropped. He looked like a fish pulled from the water. Talia just stared. her eyes impossibly wide. I live in my small apartment, I said, my voice quiet but carrying, because I choose to, because I don't need a $1,200 a night hotel room to validate my existence. I drive a 7-year-old car because it's reliable and paid for. I clip coupons because that is how I built my wealth, by not being a fool with my money. I looked directly at Lorraine. I came here tonight in this dress, which I've owned for 25 years. I pretended to be the simple, poor woman you were so desperate for me to be. My gaze hardened, turning to ice. I came here, I said, to see exactly who you are, to see how you would treat someone you believed had nothing, to see the character of the family my son married into. I sat back, letting the weight of my words settle over them. And I must congratulate you, Lorraine. Reginald, you did not disappoint. It took a full 10 seconds for Lorraine to find her voice. When she did, it was a high, thin screech. You lied, she gasped, her hand flying to her diamond necklace. You deceived us. You came in here and you set us up. Did I? I asked, my voice genuinely curious. I don't recall telling a single lie. Your dress, your job, she sputtered. I told you I worked in administration. I do. I administer the operations of 5 states. I told you I do paperwork. My signature executes contracts worth millions. I leaned forward again, my gaze unwavering. No, Lorraine, I didn't lie. I simply wore a different costume. You were the one who saw a gray dress and automatically assumed poor, simple, and uneducated. I let my eyes travel to Reginald, whose face was a mottled, unhealthy red. You saw a 60-year-old black woman, alone, and you filled in all the blanks with your own ugly prejudices. You assumed I was a burden. You assumed I was desperate. You assumed I could be bought. I turned my head, my gaze landing on Jamal. He was still in shock, but a new light was dawning in his eyes. A look of terrible, clarifying understanding. You, I said, my voice softening just for him, were ashamed of me before they even said a word. You were ashamed of your simple mother. Jamal flinched as if I had struck him. Mom, I didn't. It's all right, Jamal, I said. You were just mirroring what you knew they valued. I turned back to Lorraine. The time for softness was over. Let's review the evening, shall we? From the moment I arrived, you showed me nothing but contempt. You saw my clothes, and your smile froze. I was just surprised, she defended weakly. You seated me at the far end of the table, like a servant, I continued, ticking off the points. You ordered for me, as if I were a simpleton who couldn't read a menu. You spent an hour bragging about your money, your hotels, your wine, all designed to make me feel small. We were just making conversation. Reginald growled, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Were you just making conversation when you called me a burden? I shot back. Were you just making conversation when you offered me $800 a month to disappear from my son's life? The color drained from Lorraine's face again. She had no answer. You see, I said, my voice dropping back to that quiet, dangerous level. The people who are truly wealthy, the people who have class, they never ever need to talk about how much things cost. They don't use money as a weapon to humiliate those they think have less. I looked from Lorraine to Reginald, 2 statues of shattered arrogance. You're not wealthy. You're just rich. There's a profound difference. Into that terrible, suffocating silence the waiter returned. He moved with practiced, quiet steps, oblivious to the emotional carnage. He held a small black leather folder. Your check, sir, he said, placing it discreetly in the exact center of the table, directly between Reginald and me. A new, suffocating tension descended. The bill for this disastrous $950 dinner sat on the white tablecloth like a bomb. Reginald stared at the black folder. It sat there. An accusation. He was a man who was used to being in charge, and I had just stripped him of all his authority. He needed to get it back. With a look of pure loathing directed at me, he snatched the folder. "This," he said through clenched teeth, "was our dinner. We are hosting." He fumbled in his jacket, pulling out a thick alligator skin wallet. He made a show of ignoring his platinum card and pulling out a shiny gold one. He slapped it onto the folder. "Run this," he commanded the waiter, not even making eye contact. "Right away, sir." The waiter vanished. Lorraine tried to compose herself. She smoothed her dress, sipped her water. She was attempting to regain her poise, to pretend the last 5 minutes had not just happened. Jamal and Talia just sat, frozen, watching the scene unfold. I waited. I knew this restaurant. I knew the owner. I knew the kind of systems they ran. After 2 minutes, the waiter returned. He looked nervous. He approached Reginald's side, holding the card by its edges. "Sir," he murmured, leaning down, "I'm terribly sorry. It appears the card has been declined." Reginald's head snapped up. "What? That's impossible." I ran it twice, sir. It was declined." "Insufficient funds," the waiter whispered, clearly mortified. "Insufficient funds?" Reginald's voice was suddenly a roar. Half the restaurant turned to look. "That card has a $100,000 limit. Run it again. It's a system error." Lorraine looked like she had just swallowed poison. "Reginald, lower your voice." "I will not. This is humiliating." He shoved the card back at the waiter. "Go. Run. It. Again." The waiter, pale, took the card and scurried away. "It must be the bank," Reginald seethed, pulling out his phone. "Security protocols. They see a charge in Houston when we're supposed to be in Florida." He was making excuses, his thumbs jabbing at his screen. I just watched him. I said nothing. After another long, excruciating minute, the waiter returned. He looked physically ill. "Sir, I am so sorry. It was declined again. The same reason." "This is ridiculous," Reginald shouted, standing up now. He was drawing the attention of everyone. "Reginald, sit down. You're making a scene," Lorraine hissed, her face burning with shame. "I don't care. They are embarrassing me." He threw his wallet back on the table, fishing out a different card, a platinum one this time. "Here," he snapped, throwing it at the waiter. "Try this one. If this doesn't work, your machine is broken." The waiter, his hands trembling slightly, took the second card and retreated. We sat in a new, vibrating silence. Reginald was breathing heavily, his face slick with sweat. Lorraine was staring at the floral centerpiece as if it held the secrets to the universe. The waiter returned. He didn't even need to speak. His expression said it all. He shook his head, holding the platinum card out to Reginald. I am so sorry, sir. This one was also declined." "That's it," Reginald roared. He looked at the waiter, at his wife, at me. "This restaurant is a joke. I'm calling the bank, right now." He stormed away from the table, jabbing at his phone, his face a mask of thunder. He pushed past the maitre d' and burst out onto the sidewalk, his voice already raised in a shout. Lorraine just sat there. For the first time that night, she looked her age. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a brittle, hollow shell of humiliation. Her husband had just thrown a tantrum, and his wealth, the very foundation of her identity, had just evaporated. She was left alone at the table with the people she despised, holding a bill she apparently could not pay. Jamal looked at me, then at the waiter, then at the $950 check still sitting on the table. He started to reach for his own wallet. I put my hand over his. "No, son." I turned to the terrified waiter. "It's all right. These things happen." Ma'am, I don't know what to do, the waiter stammered. The bill? I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, I said, my voice calm and reassuring. The poor man looked like he was about to be fired. But we shouldn't wait for him to sort it out. Lorraine looked up at me, her eyes filled with a new, dawning horror. She thought I was going to offer to pay, and the humiliation of that, of being saved by the poor relation turned millionaire, was too much for her to bear. We don't need your charity, she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. It's not charity, Lorraine, I said gently. It's just dinner. I reached down to the floor, to the old faded canvas tote bag she had eyed with such contempt when I arrived. The bag I'd bought at a thrift store 10 years ago. I put it on my lap. It was a gaping, simple bag, holding my old wallet, some keys, and a pack of tissues. Talia and Jamal watched me, confused. Lorraine watched me with a kind of fascinated dread. I reached inside, past the worn leather wallet. My fingers brushed against the familiar, heavy object. I pulled it out. It was a simple, elegant piece of matte black metal. It made almost no sound as I placed it on the leather folder. It was my American Express Centurion card. Jamal didn't know what it was. Talia didn't know, but Lorraine did. I watched her eyes lock onto the card. I saw her pupils dilate. Her breath hitched. She knew brands. She knew status. And she knew, with absolute soul-crushing certainty, what that card represented. She knew you couldn't apply for it. You had to be invited. She knew the initiation fee was $10,000 and the annual fee was $5,000. She knew it required a minimum annual spend of over $250,000. She knew that the small, unassuming piece of metal I just pulled from my canvas bag represented a level of wealth, access, and power that made her husband's gold card look like a child's toy. She stared at the card. Then she lifted her eyes and stared at me. The contempt was gone. The anger was gone. For the first time that night, I saw the real Lorraine, and she was, quite simply, terrified. The waiter, who had been hovering nearby, saw the black card, and his demeanor changed instantly. The fear of Reginald was replaced by the profound, respectful deference reserved for the truly powerful. He stepped forward and took the card as if it were a sacred object. "Of course, ma'am," he said, his voice low and respectful. "And please," I said, my voice kind, "add a 30% tip for all the trouble this evening. It wasn't your fault." "Thank you, ma'am." "Thank you. I'll be right back." He practically ran. Lorraine was still speechless. She just watched me. Jamal looked at me, then at the card, then back at me. "Mom, what is that?" "It's just a credit card, son," I said gently. "No, it's not," Lorraine whispered. Her voice was hollow. "It's a Centurion." She said the name like a prayer or a curse. "It's how I handle my administrative expenses," I said, looking right at her. The waiter returned in less than 60 seconds. He wasn't just respectful. He was bordering on obsequious. He handed me the card and the receipt, bowing his head slightly. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling. Everything is taken care of. Is there anything else I can get for you? More water? Coffee?" "No, thank you, Charles," I said, reading his name tag. "You've been very kind." He beamed. "It was my pleasure. Have a wonderful night, Mrs. Sterling." I slid the black card back into my canvas tote. The contrast was almost comical. I stood up. I smoothed the wrinkles out of my gray dress. The performance was over. I looked at my son and my daughter-in-law. They were still seated, looking up at me like children. "Jamal, Talia, it was an education seeing you tonight." I then turned my full attention to Lorraine. She was still sitting, frozen in her velvet seat, a monument to her own ruined evening. "Lorraine," I said, my voice polite, "thank you for dinner. You wanted to show me what your family was all about, and you succeeded. Reginald was just walking back into the restaurant, his face still red from shouting into his phone. He stopped dead when he saw me standing, saw the check was gone, and saw the look on his wife's face. What happened? He demanded. I gave him a small, polite smile. It's all taken care of, Reginald. Don't you worry about a thing. I picked up my canvas bag from the floor and slung it over my shoulder. I am, after all, my son's mother. We don't let our family sit with an unpaid bill. I started to walk away. Jamal and Talia shot up from their chairs. Mom, wait. I paused and looked back at the table, at the four of them, Lorraine and Reginald, statues of shattered pride. Jamal, his mind clearly reeling, trying to recalculate 35 years of his life. Talia, her face awash with tears of shame. Oh, I said, as if I just remembered something. One last thing. I looked directly at Lorraine. About your generous offer, the $800 a month. I gave her a beat, letting her feel the final turn of the screw. I think I'll decline, but thank you for thinking of me. I turned, and without another word, I walked out of the restaurant. I left them in the wreckage of their own arrogance. The silence of the room roaring in my ears. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the cool, humid Houston night. I took a cab home. I didn't wait for Jamal. I knew he had a choice to make, a conversation to have, and he didn't need me there for it. I walked into my modest, quiet apartment. The contrast with the Cypress was stark. My furniture was old but comfortable. The air smelled like lemon polish and old books, not expensive perfume. I took off the gray, wrinkled dress and threw it in the trash. Its purpose was served. I showered, put on my favorite worn pajamas, and made a cup of chamomile tea. I sat on my sofa, the one Jamal's father and I had bought at a Sears outlet store in 1988, and I finally let myself breathe. I had done it. I had spoken my truth. I had drawn a line in the sand. But as I sat there, the adrenaline faded, and a cold dread began to creep in. I thought of Jamal's face, the shock, the confusion. I thought of Talia, her silent, terrified tears. I had won, yes. I had demolished Lorraine and Reginald. I had exposed their rotten cores. But at what cost? Had I just destroyed my son's marriage? I slept fitfully. The next morning, Sunday, I was up by 5:00 a.m., as I always was. I made my coffee, strong and black, and sat by my living room window, watching the sun begin to light up the Houston sky. My apartment was my sanctuary. It was the one place in the world I didn't have to perform. I wasn't Grace the director or Grace the poor relation. I was just Grace. I was sipping my coffee, trying to find a sense of peace, when my phone rang. The caller ID was, of course, Jamal. I took a steadying breath and answered. Good morning, son. Mom. His voice was a wreck. It was thick, strained, and filled with panic. Mom, it's a disaster. A total disaster. The cold dread from the night before crystallized into a knot of pure fear in my stomach. What's wrong? Are you okay? Is Talia okay? I don't know, he said, his voice cracking. I don't know. Jamal, breathe, I said, my boardroom voice taking over. Tell me exactly what happened. After you left, he rushed out. It was awful. Reginald came back in, saw you'd paid, and I think he almost had a stroke. He and Lorraine, they didn't speak. They just left. And you and Talia? We drove home in silence. I didn't know what to say. She just cried. And this morning, Lorraine called her. I waited. They're furious. Not just angry, Mom. Furious. They're unhinged. He took a ragged breath. They told Talia she has to make a choice. My blood ran cold. A choice? They told her, he said, his voice dropping to a hollow whisper, that she has to choose between them. Or me. What? They can't be serious. They are, he said. They told her that if she ever speaks to you again, not just me, Mom, but you, they will cut her off completely. They're going to disinherit her. They'll pull her trust fund, sell the house they gave us the down payment on, everything. I closed my eyes. It was the nuclear option, the one weapon they had left, not love, not family, just money. They told her she has to choose, he repeated, between her real family or the lying, manipulative snake she married into. I sank back into my couch. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. I had walked in there to expose their character. I had succeeded, but in doing so, I had handed them the crowbar they were now using to tear my son's life apart. I had won the battle, but my victory had just started a war, and the person who was going to be the first casualty was my son. What did Talia say? I asked, though I was almost afraid to hear the answer. She didn't say anything, Jamal whispered. She's been locked in the bathroom for an hour. She won't talk to me. Mom, what did I do? What did you do? You blew up our lives. His words hit me harder than any of Lorraine's insults. He was right. I had. Jamal, I said, my voice shaking for the first time. I'm sorry. I never intended. I have to go, he said, his voice flat and dead. I have to try and talk to my wife. Please, just don't call me. I'll call you. I need space. He hung up. The silence in my apartment was deafening. The sun was now streaming through my window, bright and cheerful, mocking me. I, Grace Sterling, the woman who managed $100 million budgets, the woman who could stare down a boardroom of angry executives, had just been brought to my knees. I had exposed the truth, and the truth had acted like a poison. I had tried to teach a lesson about wealth, and in the process, I had shown my son that my truth was more important than his happiness. I sat on my couch, the cold coffee in my hand, and I felt utterly, completely defeated. For the next 2 days, there was nothing. I have never known a silence so loud. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped into my throat. But it was just work emails. It was just market alerts. It was not Jamal. I went to the office on Monday, my mind a million miles away. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Maria, kept looking at me. Are you all right, Mrs. Sterling? She asked, her brow furrowed. You seem upset. I'm fine, Maria, just a family matter, I'd said. I sat in my large corner office, looking out over the city of Houston, and I felt like the poorest woman in the world. What was my $8 million worth if it cost me my son? What good was my dignity if I was all alone? I thought about calling him. 1,000 times my hand reached for the phone, but his words echoed in my head. Don't call me. So I waited. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. On Tuesday evening, I was sitting at my small kitchen table, staring at a bowl of soup I had no intention of eating. There was a knock on my apartment door. Not a buzz from the lobby, a knock, which meant someone had let them in. My heart hammered against my ribs. It had to be Jamal. I rushed to the door and pulled it open. It wasn't Jamal. It was Talia. She was standing there alone, her hands twisted together in front of her. She looked different. She wasn't the polished, perfect woman from the restaurant. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore no makeup. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. She was wearing simple jeans and a sweater. She looked for the first time like a real person. Talia, I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. Grace, she said, and her voice was thick with tears. Can I come in? I stepped back wordlessly and let her pass. She walked into my living room, the one she had probably heard her parents mock, and she just stood in the center, looking around. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her shoulders shaking. I am so sorry. Sorry for what, child? I asked gently. For everything, she said, turning to face me. For Saturday, for how they treated you, for me, for not saying anything, for just sitting there. I was a coward. Talia, you were in an impossible position, I said. No, she said, a new firmness in her voice. It wasn't impossible. It was just hard. And I chose the easy path. I've always chosen the easy path. She took a deep, shuddering breath. I need to explain something, not as an excuse, just so you understand. I gestured to the couch. Sit. We sat, me on my old armchair, her on the edge of the Sears sofa. My parents, she began, staring at her hands. They weren't always like this. They came here from nothing. My father grew up in a shack, no running water. My mother, she told me she used to go to bed hungry. They are terrified of being poor again. It's like a sickness. I understand that, I said quietly. But I don't think I did. Not really, she said. To them, money isn't just money. It's a shield. It's armor. It's how they prove they're safe. It's how they prove they matter. And so, I finished for her. Anyone who doesn't have it, they don't matter. She nodded, a fresh wave of tears spilling down her cheeks. They measure everything. Everyone. And I grew up in that. I grew up believing that my value was in my grades, my clothes, my performance. And if I failed, if I wasn't perfect, I wasn't loved. I was a bad investment. I ached for her. This poor child, raised to be a commodity. Talia, I said gently, what happened with Jamal? With the choice? She looked up at me, and her eyes, though red, were suddenly clear. They were fierce. They called me Sunday, she said. They did exactly what Jamal told you. They gave me the ultimatum. It was them, their money, their family. Or it was you and Jamal. They threatened to disinherit me, to take the house, to erase me. She took a shaky breath. So I made my choice. My heart stopped. This was it. I told them, she said, her voice growing stronger, to keep their money. I just stared. I told them, she continued, a small sad smile touching her lips, that I had spent my entire life being their perfect little product, and I was done. I told them that Jamal was my husband, that you were the bravest person I had ever met, and that I was going to be part of a family that valued honesty and love. I told them, she finished, her voice now clear as a bell, that they could keep their diadem. I didn't want it anymore. And I hung up. She looked at me, her face a mixture of terror and liberation. So I'm disinherited. We'll have to move. We'll have to, I don't know what we'll do, but I don't care. She stood up and I stood up with her. Grace, she said, sobbing openly now, I am so sorry for what they did to you, and I am so sorry it took me this long to see it. I didn't say anything. I just opened my arms. She fell into them, clutching me like a drowning person, and she wept. She wept for her parents, for her childhood, for the life she had just thrown away. I held her, stroking her hair. It's okay, baby, I whispered. It's okay. The cycle of toxicity, the one built on the rotten foundation of money and control, had just been broken. It hadn't been broken by me. It had been broken by her. We stood there in the entryway of my small apartment, holding each other. It wasn't a hug of polite family members. It was a hug of survivors. What about Jamal? I finally asked, my voice thick. Talia pulled back, wiping her eyes. A small, watery smile touched her lips. He's at our apartment, packing. My heart seized. Packing? He told me last night, she said, her voice full of a new, quiet pride. He told me he didn't care about their money. He said he'd love me if we lived in a studio apartment and ate instant noodles. He said he just wanted me. He's a good man, Grace. Yes, he is, I said, my own heart swelling with a pride so fierce it hurt. I hadn't broken them. That night had forged them. So what happens now? I asked. We find a new place, she said, her voice stronger. We have to be out in 30 days, according to my father's email. It's terrifying. But she looked around my living room. It's also exciting. It feels like the first real decision I've ever made. You won't be alone, I told her. She looked at me, confused. Talia, you are not disinherited, I said, taking her hands. You just switched families. I have an $8 million portfolio and one son. It seems to me that portfolio now needs to support a son and a daughter. Her eyes filled with a new wave of tears, but this time they were different. They weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief. I can't ask you for that, she whispered. You're not asking, I said. I'm telling. That's what family does. We don't invest with strings attached. We just give. You and Jamal are going to build a life. And your mother, I smiled, squeezing her hands, is going to make sure you have a strong foundation to build it on. I picked up my phone from the kitchen counter. I dialed Jamal. He answered on the very first ring, his voice frantic. Talia, are you okay? Did you go? Are you at my mom's? I'm here, son, I said, my voice steady. And your wife is here with me. We're okay. We're a family. I heard him let out a long, shuddering breath on the other end, a sound of 2 days of held-in panic finally being released. Talia, I said, holding the phone out to her, talk to your husband. She took the phone, her hand trembling, and put it to her ear. Jamal, she whispered. Hi. I love you. I walked away, giving her privacy, and looked out my window. The epilogue to our story wrote itself, not with drama, but with quiet peace. Months later, we had a barbecue, not at the Cypress, in the small, grassy backyard of my apartment complex. Jamal and Talia were there. They had a new house, a beautiful but modest one in a good neighborhood. One they chose, not one that was given to them as a golden cage. I helped with the down payment. It was a gift, not a transaction. Talia is lighter. She's finding out who she is without her parents' crushing expectations. She's taking classes. She's happy. Jamal is a different man. The weight of his shame is gone. He looks at me differently now. Not with the shock of that night, but with a deep, quiet respect. He finally sees me, not the simple mother, but Grace. We never heard from Lorraine and Reginald again. Their silence was its own final transactional statement. They still had their millions, their properties, their social status. They were still, by every measure they valued, rich. But I, sitting on my old lawn chair, watching my son laugh as he flipped burgers, his arm around his wife's waist, I was the wealthy one. That night in the restaurant, I had set out to teach a lesson, but in the end, we all learned one. That you can have all the money in the world and be utterly destitute. And you can have a simple, honest life and possess everything that truly matters. Grace's journey came to an end that night, But the true work of her heart was only just beginning. Thank you, my dear friends. It's a blessing to share this story with you. If it touched your spirit, I'd surely love to hear from you. Tell me, what city are you listening from, dear? Go on and rate this story from 0 to 10, so I can see how far our stories travel. Feels like sitting on the porch together, just talking, heart to heart. May the Lord bless you and keep you always.